Yo, guys, it's me, Matrix, coach of the Welsh Waylords, and today I'm bringing you a weekly recap of the UGA Season 2, Week 1 of the Johto Division. And I am joined here with Masenko of the Drowsy Dracosults
Hi, everyone.
and Bryan of the Charlotte Beadrills.
Hey, what's up, guys?
So today I'm hoping to discuss what our viewpoints, our perspectives, what we think of the results of the first week. Um, then talk about where each team will now rank on our basically an updated version of our post-draft analysis video,
Hmm.
giving you our updated rankings of all the teams. And we hope to end off with just an insight into what we think will happen or our predictions for the week two matchups coming up.
Uh, if you we did a full draft recap on both Matrix's and my channel. The first part is on Matrix's channel, and then the second part is on my channel. So if you're not caught up, go ahead and watch those videos, and we'll wait for you.
Yeah, we'll be right here waiting for you. Okay.
Yep.
So moving on to the matches themselves. Saw a lot of 2-0s this week.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah. Um, so this is the results of the week. We've got the Charlotte Beadrills who won 2-0 against the London Lucarios. We got the South Croydon Saws who 2-0'd the Lily Cove Lichen Rocks. The Orlando Oshawots 2-0'd the Dark Lords Greninjas. Amateur Alchemies 2-0'd the Southeast Lux Rays. Myself, Welsh Waylords, managed to pick up a 2-0 win against the Cardiff Kamalas. And the Merseyside Marowaks managed to 2-0 at the Bavarian Landers. Uh, Aside from that, the only team that managed to pick up a set win was the Crummock Colossals against the Somerville Scraggies, who won against them 2-1.
Yeah,
The
and as you'll see, my match with the Age of Slash Blades, unfortunately, there was like a technical difficulty in the third match, and there was like disconnecting, and just sort of based on the circumstances of what had happened in that game, it was pretty unclear who was going to win, and we just decided that we're going to redo our match during the makeup week at the end of the season, just to keep things fair. And we obviously had that approved by the moderation team. And even though those
sorry,
results are unofficial, we could still talk about them a little bit because there were some interesting, I think, takeaways from those two games
yeah.
that ended up completing.
So Brian, if you want, do you want to talk about what how your match went with the London Lucarios?
Sure. So, my match was against a very heavy Trick Room mode, and we thought the best way to cancel that mode out was to just not allow the Trick Room. So
Hmm.
my strategy for that was to roar out the Trick Room setter, the Dusclops with Entei, and it basically worked to perfection. There was really nothing my opponent really could do after roaring out the Trick Room.
Yeah, is the London Lucarios is that Trick Room heavy team with like Dusclops, the Coffee Bregus, and his Trick Room sweepers such as Escavalier and Torkoal. I believe he brought Torkoal against you though,
He
and
did bring
Escav, didn't
Torkoal
he?
against me. Didn't really do much, but that's just the funny thing about that matchup is the most damage was actually self-inflicted with Entei's Life Orb.
Hmm.
Like that Life Orb damage did more damage than my opponent could.
Dang.
And another
Yes,
interesting takeaway was that I didn't have to Dynamax at all during that matchup.
that's right. That's right. Um,
It was not intentional. I did not go in and go like, okay, this is the matchup. I'm not going to Dynamax. But it just so happened that as they Dynamax, I just KO'd the Dynamax Mon before they could even attack with it.
yeah, as you say, denying them of the Trick Room allowed you a great positioning through the match, and you were
Yeah.
able to just slowly, just well, not even slowly, really, but just chip away at the team enough to guarantee you the 8-0 sweep. You didn't even lose them
Yeah.
on, so
So that's
it was
a
it was
pretty dominant win, obviously, and obviously you prepped really well. I think the London Lucarios are watching this, like, obviously, once again, I think this is something we mentioned last time, is like when you're that reliant on the Trick Room, you do need to like keep in mind those types of things, like a roar from Entei. You really got to prep for that kind of stuff.
And a mistake
Exactly.
he made in that battle was actually fake outing the Entei despite showing the inner focus, because the Scrafty had the Intimidate ability, and now in Generation 8, inner focus blocks Intimidate drops.
Right.
So he should have seen that. That was a mistake he made. But
yeah.
like I said in my video, that's the point of Draft League. You make mistakes, you learn from them, and become a better battler because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really getting to know your opponent's Pokemon. You know, if something comes up and it says that inner focus is activated, you should definitely look up what that is. And even if it's mid-battle, you have a couple seconds to just kind of Google it however you can. But, you know, obviously this was just the first week, so there's still room to improve, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to...
We have the Lily Cove Lichen Rocks and the South Croydon Saws. We had I'd say, quite the dominant win from the South Croydon Saws. I watched it earlier on in the week. I don't know if you caught it, did you, Masenko?
Unfortunately, I didn't, but I do see here the match results. I could put them on the screen for a minute, just to sort of show that. As you can see here, we got Terrakion going 4-1 in its KD ratio, which is pretty excellent. Showing from the Terrakion, clearly, obviously, I would assume Sneasel was its partner. Probably did beat up, right? Did you watch the games?
I think I can't remember off the top of my head. If I know Terrakion Sneasel was the first lead, I believe, in the game 1. I know the Tornadus max in the second game.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I believe the Tornadus was Defiant.
Got it.
Which made sense because obviously he's facing a team with double Intimidate.
Right.
With the Landorus and the Salamence.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it was an Adrenaline Orb Tornadus with the Defiant ability. Really prepped around that double Intimidate lead. And it was quite a creative tech, quite creative in its set, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that's a very profound point. Is like the fact that, you know, you have 2 Intimidates on your team goes to show that when someone can really take advantage of that, like a Defiant user, it's something you gotta keep in mind, right? Defiant is a very devastating ability.
And I believe the Lily Cove Lichen Rocks maxed Corviknight at least one game. I don't remember if they maxed Corviknight in both games.
Well, it seems like Corviknight was their star player overall, so that does kind of make sense.
Yeah.
Going 3-2.
The issue I found from this match is that it was quite passive on the Lily Cove side. So they had these strong mons like Landorus, they had Salamence, but Salamence got one-shotted by a Sneasel, and that's because of you going up against the opponent who has a Sneasel with Triple Axle. Triple Axle with inner focus, it's never going to get that attack drop. It's going to basically wipe the floor of a Landorus or a Salamence, which has a 4 times weakness to ice.
Yeah, and Sneasel has 95 attack, so like that's nothing to sneeze at. No pun intended.
No pun intended. But the prep from the Lily Cove Lichen Rocks could have been a little bit more specific to the matchup they had. Bringing 2 Intimidate users that were both weak to ice was just kind of asking for a Defiant Tornado sweep or a Sneasel to revenge kill, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not even the main threats that the South Croydon Saws had on their team.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, some takeaways from this match. Obviously, you know, Tornadus can be scary and Terrakion Sneasel can be scary. You know, like these are really important combos to know in in VGC. Like I'm facing against the South Croydon Soars next week, and I am keeping it like, you know, I'm prepping or trying at least to try to prep around certain elements of their team, including Terrakion Sneasel, which is a very obvious combo that exists. The Tornadus, you know, trying to prep for both of its modes with Prankster and with Defiant, you know, trying to figure out whether or not that's something I need to worry about. And so, yeah, that would be one takeaway from this game, is to just like try to learn the combos, you know, once again, this is a really nice community. So if you're having trouble like knowing what to do for your prep, you could always, you know, reach out to some of us, and we'd be more than happy to help you too. I know that our little group would be more than happy to help some people in this league draft and kind of learn the matchups a little bit.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I feel like the Corviknight Gmax was a good Gmax option, especially like against Terrakion and stuff. I believe that it was Leftovers Corviknight, which
it was Leftovers.
I feel like it could have benefited from a more helpful item.
I think he went a more generic set instead of something that more reflects the matchup.
But we're talking the first match of the season, and it's very easy for him to just bounce back from this 1 week defeat.
Absolutely.
Moving
on to Krimic Colossals versus Somerville Scraggy.
Yeah, probably the more fun battle to watch, I think, just for the pure fact that they went to a third game.
It was a good triplet of matches. So
just a quick look at the stats there. You see Cobalion has a 5-1 KD ratio. You see the Tauros with a 4-2 KD. And ultimately, Somerville won, but it looks like a very close match.
So what happened was, if I'm not mistaken, is that Dr. Dave, with the Krimic Colossals, he took the first game 4-0. He just 4-0 swept the Somerville Scraggies.
Yeah, he did the Frost Breath
anger point
sweep.
Yes. Yeah. But what was unique about it was that Somerville Scraggies led, I believe,
I don't remember either.
I think it may have been Bolton and...
Oh yeah, Bolton, Choice Scarf Bolton. And,
I think it might be Choice Scarf Bolton and Gudra.
And Gudra, yeah.
So... what Somerville Scraggies planned to do that turn 1 was to Choice Scarf Nuzzle the Frostlass to reduce its speed so it couldn't crit the Tauros to activate Anger Point, so that Gudra could take a hit and go, and that was the crucial turn 1 play. The Colossals protected turn 1 with the Frostlass, preventing the Bolton from hitting it with a Nuzzle, and then went for a max strike straight into I don't remember which mon, but the important part was that it lowered the opponent's speed to the point that the Bolton now, even with the Choice Scarf, was slower than the Frostlass. So the following turn, the Gudra was slower, the Bolton was slower, the Frost Breath hit off, and the Anger Point Tauros just completely cleaned up.
Seems like a good little tech there, just to sort of be aware of the speed control, right? Like, I'm sure that the Colossals knew that the Bolton could possibly have brought that, you know, Nuzzle or some form of speed control, and thought, you know what, I'm not going to take a risk. I'm just going to protect the Frostlass and do a max strike to get some speed advantage. And that worked out for them, clearly. Yeah,
and I feel like it was a risk to lead the Frostlass and the Tauros, especially when the Scraggies brought a Togekiss.
Right.
But it was a risk that paid off in that first match. Now, the subsequent matches went in the Somerville Scraggies' favour, but I believe the Colossals made a few misplays on their end due to minding their children.
He Max airstreamed on a Gale Wings Max Fletchinder onto a grounded Pokemon.
But that was because he got into a position where he was meant to max the Tauros in game 2, but misclicked, and in the end he ended up was forced into a position where Fletchinder was his only mon left on the field, with its only attacking move being a flying type. So he was forced to max Fletcher into out of position in game 2, and game 3 was a little bit closer, but the Scraggies managed to prevent that anger point lead that Torres that they set up previously.
Yeah.
So overall, it was quite an intense match with unfortunate misplays on the Colossal's side.
And you said that's because you got distracted by real life, potentially.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's always a shame.
He's a dad.
I guess a key takeaway there is like, misclicks
kids.
happen. Yeah, don't have kids. That too.
But no, exactly, misclicks happen, and it's sometimes you have games where you can learn from, and some games you're like, oh, I knew what I should have done, but it was just a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next matchup is the Orlando Oshawots versus the Dark Lords Greninjas. Now, I've only managed to see the first half of that game, so the first set, but the Oshawots beat up with Crocodile and Whimsicott with his Justified Arcanine.
Very interesting.
And the Arcanine was the mon that got picked up the most KOs in the 2 matches.
5-0.
Yes.
Yeah. It was leading the kills board until I happened.
So what was interesting about this matchup was the way the Oshawots played. I thought was really good. It was really smart. They played it very conserving of their mon. They knew what their win condition was and played to that. So they led game 1 with Whimsicott Arcanine, which to some is a clear beat up scenario into the Arcanine, especially if the Intimidate doesn't activate,
Right.
Yeah.
The Dark Lords actually led a really good counter to that mode straight up, which was Suicune and Fake Out Grimmsnarl. And turn 1 went really well. The Greninjas, I don't know if they intentionally did it, but instead of going for the Fake Out into the Whimsicott, they went for a Tailwind with the Suicune to really get that speed control from that turn 1. And they went for a Light Screen with the Grimmsnarl. And what the Oshawots did is they went for that double protect to try and waste out the Fake Out that was potentially coming.
Got it.
Now, 2 things happened from that. 1, it made the Oshawots think that in the later game, in game 2, that the Grimmsnarl didn't have Fake Out, which meant that they were able to Fake Out in that game 2. And although the Oshawots still won, I think that was mainly from them preserving their mons to position themselves into a way that they knew they could win. Because after that turn 1, he didn't just go straight up into the beat up. He knew the Suicune was going to outspeed. He knew the Suicune Max Geyser was coming, so he swapped out the Arcanine straight up into the Rotom Wash, and that Rotom Wash is just so bulky. It just takes hits.
One of my favorite
Electric
Pokemon.
type mon onto Suicune. Yeah, so I just think the way the Oshawots played it in such a conserving way, they knew where they needed to max. They knew what mons they needed to conserve. They managed to get rid of the Suicune with his support mons, and then set up his Arcanine with the beat up, and just finish off the game with Arcanine. And unfortunately, the Dark Lord Greninja's Grimmsnarl's only attacking move was a Dark type Darkest Lariat. So every time that hit the Arcanine, it's just boosting its attack even more. I just think that the Oshawots had great prep, and I also believe the Dark Lords missed the fact that the Oshawots had traded Rotom Heat for Rotom Wash during the grace period. And I think that's kind of what led to the downfall in this matchup, because they didn't really have a counter to that Rotom Wash, which was just sponging hits.
Right. Yeah, so any final thoughts on that match?
I'll give it a watch when I get home, but yeah, that sounds. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the only one I really couldn't watch because I was busy today.
So the next matchup is the Amateur Alchemies versus the Southeast Luxrays. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the Amateur Alchemies have got one scary team.
Yes.
It was such a hard matchup for the Southeast Luxrays, which has that Rillaboom G-Max and Drifblim combo, and the Haxorus. The Lapras G-Max and Moltres Galar just counters Rillaboom and Drifblim. it already puts the Southeast Lux Rays at a disadvantage, having to rely on some of his other mons. And I believe that he did a good job with, like, he prepped for the alchemies, having the alchemy with the decorate onto his mons by having a fairly fast Tapu Fini with haze, which is a good answer to these type of modes where you're getting all these stat boosts.
Yeah,
and it looks like his Tapu Fini performed pretty well too. Picking up 3 kills in game 1. It looks like that game 1 looked pretty close.
Yes. One of the biggest things about this game, especially that game 1, was there was a lot of RNG that was against the Southeast Lux Rays. So I believe he managed to. The Southeast Lux Rays had got himself into a position that he could have won in game 1, but a non-max Moltres Galar managed to get a Fiery Wrath and and flinch the Haxorus, I believe, which prevented the Haxorus from picking up a later KO, and then it just meant the Alchemies were that one turn ahead of the Southeast Lux Rays, which just stopped them from winning that game. I think that was a game-changing flinch. I think the Lux Rays were in a position that a few smart plays, they could have ended out that first game on a win.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, game 2, his luck wasn't much better, with the Tapu Fini running Muddy Water, which is an 85% accurate move, but missing I think the Alchemy twice back to back. And it was a half health Alchemy, which would have picked up the KO. Oh no, it wasn't Alchemy. BHM would have picked up the KO on the BHM, and because he couldn't get them KOs on the BHM that was running Thunderbolts, it was just doing some damage off onto his Unpheasant, his Chloritz, and his Tapu Fini. I think what really missed out on Southeast Lux Rays prep, the prep was great, as good as you could get against such a dominant team matchup. I think that Tapu Fini was just missing that coverage for the Kokoroja in the end, as I think the only attacking moves it was running was a Fairy and Ice type, which meant it wasn't able to damage the Kokoroja.
Got it.
Because it wasn't the Tapu Fini that was running Muddy Water, it was Chloritza that was running Muddy Water. And it was the Chloritza that made the misses. So if the Tapu Fini was running them water move, at least a water move, it would have been hitting that Kokoroja to a point that
neutral damage at least.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just a little slip up on some of the prep on that side, but like other than that, the prep was good. It's just a case of, well, how do you stop a Lapras G-Max or a Moltres Galar once it gets rolling at like +2,
it's a very difficult.
Decorate.
It's a very difficult matchup.
And that haze tech
did
pop off.
Not to mention that RNG is just a part of our game. You can just get RNG screwed over.
Exactly.
It's
I
the game we play.
think this first week was unfortunate for the Southeast Lux Rays, but I do think that they have a good string of wins ahead of them yet to come.
Yeah,
I would agree. Moving on.
So we move on to my match versus the Cardiff Kamalas.
Sure.
And it was an interesting match. I enjoyed it. It was good.
Another RNG match.
Yes, but I don't think it was as big as the Southeast Lux Rays. And the reason being is because of my whole game plan here was I needed to be able to prevent the Sun mode with Venusaur. I have a bad history of losing against Venusaur teams. So I decided that my game plan was physical Moltres against a Venusaur G-Max in Sun. Because of a physical fire type often does more damage to Venusaur than what a special one does, especially when the margins is like 100 to 125. And coaching with Mienshao. Now, that was my plan in game 1, and they led Venusaur G-Max with Liepard for the sunny day. Brilliant. Exactly what I was hoping for. Went for the Max Flare, and he double switches out into Kabutops and Clefairy. And that was honestly a great switch, because if I was running a mixed Moltres, I had that Solar Beam on it for a Max Overgrowth ready for Kabutops, because I knew that was probably the biggest check that Moltres had on that team.
Right.
But because he double swapped out on turn 1 into the Clefairy, it made it a lot more difficult for me.
Yeah.
I had to play around that I knew he was going to be using Max Rockfall. So I managed to max guard, swap out later on into my Primarina. Now, as I was swapping out, I coached the Primarina. And the reason being is not to get an attack buff. Who wants a physical Primarina? It was enough of a defensive boost to at least live half health from a max rockfall from a jolly Kabutops.
Right.
Because if you don't know, coaching is basically a bulk up for your ally.
Partner.
It gives you a plus attack and a plus defense.
Yeah. And I did that because I knew Primarina would take like way too much damage on a switching if I didn't. And it was not like I needed Mian Shao to do any damage that turn. And I personally think that was probably one of the better plays for me on that match. So what happened afterwards is that the Card of Kamalas ended up using Helping Hand Rock Slide. And yes, it missed both my Drampa and my Primarina.
Yeah.
But it was never going to KO because I got that defense boost on that Primarina.
Yeah.
Could have flinched.
So I was always, yes, that's the thing. That's what I was getting to. The only way that turn would have swayed in his favor was if he had got the RNG like the RNG boosts.
Right.
And that would from a flinch onto either one of my mons. Because I managed to pick up the double KO there. One of Primarina went down, and then I was with Drampa with Cloud9 still on the field. He couldn't Sunny Day, and my Moltres can just one-shot the Venusaur from there.
Yeah.
So, although I started that first game with a bad turn 1, I managed to position myself well enough that I could end the game out.
So I guess one key takeaway from this week is like using low accuracy moves can be pretty harmful at times. Like you always want to try to.
MNJ TV says if it's not 100% accurate, it's 50% accurate. Yeah.
And going into game 2, I knew he wasn't going to lead the same because he'd seen I'd got a counter for it. So I decided to switch my modes and go for my Trick Room, which was Aromatisse and Fungus. I was able to set the Trick Room with Aromatisse, Spore the Clefairy, and basically force the switch out on the Dragapult after one turn of max. Due to Fungus being the slowest thing in Trick Room and able to get off a Spore onto him.
Yep.
But I didn't. I went for the foul play because obviously I want to try and KO things with Fungus. So close to getting a KO with Fungus.
Maybe
Fungus was the
week.
only mon who... Yes, maybe. Fungus was the only mon of my side to fall in that game. Primarina was the star of the show in game 2. It being Assault Vest, managed to just take hits from his special mons like Venusaur.
Yeah.
So
I think we should move on to probably the next match.
So the next match is the Merseyside Marowaks versus the Bavarian Landorus, which was a 2-0 win. And the Bavarian Landorus was our highest ranked team in our power rankings. And I believe the Merseyside Marowaks, we'd managed to rank it 13. So this was kind of an upset in terms of where we'd positioned them.
Absolutely.
But would it be an upset, though? He was a finalist last year. He was a finalist in his division. But we really consider this an upset?
No, so both of these players are really talented. But the teams themselves is how we ranked the teams.
Right.
And honestly, the Merseyside Marowaks, their prep was just great.
Yeah, I think
in my opinion, it was
Stone Edge, No Guard, Machamp into the Gmax Charizard, and then Focus Sash on it as well to live a Max Airstream.
And although I would say that's kind of an obvious play for the Machamp to be doing, like if you're the Bavarian Landorus and you've got that Charizard Gmax, you should know that Machamp is a threat with that No Guard Stone Edge, and it would, if you want to get it off, it would be either Assault Vest or it would be Focus Sash. The Marowaks were completely prepped for that mode of that Charizard Gmax with Sableye Sunny Day. He never brought Thwacky, the Bavarian Landorus, which meant his Blastoise and his Amoonguss were basically unchecked. And it just allowed him to do so much. An interesting bit of tech I really liked was the Machamp with the quick guard against the Scizor with the bullet punch.
I'm excited to. I'm actually getting his Machamp for week 3. We just made that trade for my Caparaja, so I'll be having that soon.
What also makes sense for that quick guard is obviously it protects the team, so he's able to prevent Sableye from quashing as well, which is why I thought that was the little bit of tech that I was like, yes, the Marowak's prepped really well for this team. The Marowak's just, to me, seem to be in control of the pace of the game.
Yeah. Well, that just comes down to some, like, obviously, like all the other matches we've talked about today, really good prep pays off. Just knowing what your opponent's bringing, having a game plan against it, right? You know that the Charizard Sableye could come, so you need to have an answer to it. If you don't have an answer to it and it comes, then you just lose that match, right? Because that's just how strong it can be. Of course, some cool tech like Machamp with the quick guard you mentioned. It's like one of the most interesting parts of Draft League is being able to have that open team sheet. You know what your opponent's Pokemon are. So unlike like a more standard tournament, you can really make use of these more niche lower tier Pokemon. Machamp's a tier 3. But he can quick guard, and that helped him here, and he used it effectively. So just trying to find the best way to make use of your Pokemon. How are they going to provide the most value in your game?
Yeah. And I believe if you were to look at the Marowak's team, you'd look and go, oh, it's Trick Room heavy. I believe they didn't have I don't think they had Marowak for this matchup, or did they?
Doesn't look like it. No, they have Blastoise, Noivern, Machamp, Rubombi, Amoonguss, and Thundurus.
I'm just trying to think if they had something else on the team before if they traded it. Which, they had Thundurus, that's it. So they had Thundurus Incarnate as a option for them to bring against them.
Yeah.
So what was interesting is if you're looking at this team, you're thinking, oh well, maybe Thundurus might be coming with an electric type move for the Charizard, and that'd be a threat. Or you think, oh, he's going to be going Trick Room, the Glastrier, and the Blastoise maybe against the Charizard. But what was actually brought wasn't that Trick Room mode. It was Machamp, it was Noivern, it was Ribombi, Amoonguss, Blastoise. So
and that's, I think, partly what's really interesting is I think that's more prep on the Marowak side, just because you see the other mons he brought are Gastrodon and Manectric, right? Both of which redirect water and electric respectively to protect the Charizard. So being able to go, okay, well, if I can't hit the Charizard with this move or that move, I need a new move to figure out how to kill it, right?
I agree, and I think that's so the Bavarian Landorus's draft, the way they've drafted, is to try and protect the Charizard Gmax as much as they can, which protects them from the water, it protects them from the electric. But what he doesn't have a protection for from redirection is these surprise moves like Stone Edge from a Machamp.
Right.
So it's the 4 times weakness to rock that this Charizard just has to watch out for. Otherwise, he's pretty well protected everywhere else. And I think it might have been a bit of a surprise, or he might have just been caught out of position, as you say, like a focus sash on the Machamp and then revenge killed by it. So
yeah, absolutely.
I definitely think these two teams are still strong, and I think they're both going to go on to win a lot more games yet. So
completely agree.
We'll see if this is just a little setback or where it will go for the Bavarian Landorus.
Agreed.
Do we want to move on to my unofficial game?
Yeah, you can give us your thoughts on the match a little bit, and we know that both the first 2 sets ended 1-1, so you can just talk us through what you thought.
So I think this match was pretty interesting. Just the first match I won pretty convincingly, and game 2 my opponent won very convincingly. So I think that's to me, that was an indication that me using a specific lead that maybe caught him off guard helped me win that first match, gave me a strong snowball advantage where I could make use of. And then game 2, he brought out Lytton and Electivire. Yeah, and the Electivire was not something that I had particularly prepped for too much, just because I was like, you know what, I have my Max Quake from my Rapidash Galar, or my Ninetales or Venusaur. And I think I might have calced a little bit wrong on my Ninetales because it was not doing as much damage as I wanted it to when I maxed it against the Electivire.
Was the Electivire Assault Vest?
It was Assault Vested, so it was a combination of the two things. I think just like me not doing quite enough damage, and it also being Assault Vested. And I also made a mistake. I thought it would be probably Motor Drive for its ability, because I have a Zapdos as my primary carry on my team.
But it was Vital Spirit.
But
Yeah.
it was Vital Spirit. You sleep powdered into it, and it didn't work.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
that was a
that
big
makes sense.
mistake. So like those
Did
little
you know
surprising
Electivire
techs.
Did you know Electivire had Vital Spirit or no?
I did know that it had that ability, but I was willing to take the risk that it didn't, just based on how
Yeah.
I would have prepped against myself.
Okay.
And once it revealed that Vital Spirit was its ability, it kind of screwed me over a little bit. But then, my thoughts there were also sort of like, well, even if it is Vital Spirit, I can keep that in mind for game 3. Like even if that's like my key mistake that I'm making right here, I can know that now and adapt to it, which I think I did in game 3. And then the third match, I actually led to try and deal with the Electivire Torracat now, or not Torracat, sorry, I always get them confused. Lytton. I brought Adrenaline Orb Impidimp.
I know.
Which Impidimp usually underspeeds Lytton, so that allowed me to get a Fake Out off first, and maybe get a little bit of setup, maybe stop their momentum a little bit. And then I got a really, really lucky both crit and burn with Scorching Sands against the maxed Electivire with my Ninetales. And
Yes.
That's
the
where
turn,
the disconnect happened.
and that's where the disconnect happened. So I think just based on how the match was going, I would say it's a little unclear still who would have won that. He had his rain mode left. He had Kingdra and Politoed in the back, but I had not maxed yet. I had my Zapdos with Thunder and Hurricane, so I would have made use of his own rain against him. With the ability to soak the Kingdra to get rid of his dragon typing and make it more super effective. Plus, I also had Impidimp with priority Thunder Wave to try to slow him down, as well as I had reset the Fake Out as well for my Impidimp by switching him. So it was going to be a pretty close match overall, I think.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it was going to end up pretty close.
So overall, key takeaways. Prep can be creative in Draft League. It's like, you could always do really interesting things to try to eke out those advantages. Looking forward to the rematch. It's gonna be interesting.
Okay, so I think that concludes this section. So
Sure.
we can show the standings of the top 6 next, which is Bryan and his Charlotte Beedrills up there with his MVP Entei.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I'm currently in second because my kill death ratio is slightly lower, with Primarina as my kill leader. The Merseyside Marowak, which is my week 2 opponent, is just there at number 3. Ribombi was surprisingly his MVP, but that's just because it never died and it took 2 kills.
Yeah.
He was very spread out with what he was getting them kills with.
Yeah.
South Croydon Soars managed to take 4th spot with his Terrakion. The Orlando Oshawotts, an oddball who isn't here with us today, but definitely strong player. You face him next week, don't you, Bryan?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's finished in 5th as of week 1, and its 6th spot is the Amateur Alchemies. with their G-Max Lapras, no surprise there,
Yeah.
being their MVP.
All right.
All right.
So,
Moving on. So this was our original rankings that we had given all the teams, and I think right now what we are gonna do is sort of rethink a little bit of based on this new information, this new week that we now know how everyone did and how everyone's shaping up. We can sort of talk about readjusting whether or not we think certain people should go higher or lower based on this week. So we can...
So we've got teams that won, which is the Welsh Wailords, the Charlotte Beedrills, the Orlando Oshawotts, the Alchemies, Scraggies, and the Merseyside Marowaks and the South Croydon Saws.
Yeah.
So where do you guys want to start with this?
Well, I think the most obvious one right now is talking about the Bavarian Landorus, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I had him as number... Did I have him as number one last week? For me, personally, I'm not sure.
You had me as your number one.
Oh, right. I think it was only number 3 or something. And I think that's still where sort of he belongs. I still think, like...
Yeah.
If I were to readjust this tier list myself, I think putting him in number 3 would be good, just because I think that... I guess based on this week's performance, you saw someone like someone like the Merseyside Marowaks, where we didn't rate his team very highly, came and got the win there. Obviously, upsets happen all the time, but as with someone with such a good team, you really do need to wield it properly.
I don't disagree. I think the Bavarian Landers are still a strong team, and I think it was more of a case of not that they were they had played bad or they had bad prep per se, but rather they were just out prepped by the Merseyside Marowaks. I think the Merseyside Marowaks came with a game plan to counter whatever the Landorus was bringing.
Right.
Do we think the Bavarian Landorus are maybe a little top heavy now? A little more top heavy than we thought?
I still think it's quite diverse.
For me, their team is just really, 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 really strong. Just because they went like a heavy Charizard build this week does not mean that that's the only thing it can do. There are plenty of other strategies they can pursue with their team.
I know that the other mode that he could have ran, which would have given the Marowak an issue, something like weakness policy, like yes. So there's definitely scope for him to mix it up a bit.
Right. Yeah.
That Charizard team and that Charizard core is pretty solid.
Another thing that I noticed is the only Pokemon that Merseyside had in terms of grass types was a Moongus. So if you can deal with that, Gastrodon actually poses a pretty big threat. You know, I always like the idea of maxing Gastrodon in some cases.
Yeah, it's bulky enough.
Yeah.
You get a Storm Drain boost off onto it, and
starts taking names.
Especially you can even run Rain Dance Sableye with Gastrodon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get that extra damage. But I can see it being third. I could see him being a little bit low because he did lose to quite a low ranked team, like maybe fourth. Because we got some decent teams that might just push past them to the top 3. I don't know what we want to do with you.
Well, we'll just bump me down for now. Like basically wherever we put people, I think we can readjust. Maybe we put you at number 1 now. And move me up to number 2, and then we can just whoever's in the what number slot they're in, we could just bump everyone else up maybe.
Okay.
That kind of makes sense.
That's fine. I don't mind being up in the top position. I don't know, maybe because of my draft is strong. I don't know if my performance merited that position, but
I mean, you've won pretty convincingly. I think obviously you will be your own worst critic. I still ranked you as number 1. I still think that you displayed a level of understanding of the game and skill necessary to overcome certain hurdles that were presented to you in the match. Right? You saw they did a really bold strategy in the double switch, and you were like, okay, well, I got to start coaching my Primarina now because that's one way I can deal with this Kabutops, right? That's a level of mastery of the game that I think that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think about. Like, I don't think I would have thought of that necessarily, coaching my Primarina switch.
And to be fair, I was pretty proud of that switch.
And that's what
Yeah,
experience can do for you.
When I saw that coaching and then you saw the switch in Prima, I immediately knew it was a defensive coaching maneuver, not an offensive coaching maneuver, which I don't think a lot of people really think of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next question is, do we feel like I'm number 2? I don't think so, personally. I'd rather go a bit lower, but I guess I'll let you guys discuss that since I have my own
I think
biases.
for the time being, you did lose a set this week. That's not to say like any discredit. I do think that we move you down a little bit from number 3 for a minute.
I completely agree. So
I think that's because of I personally think the Charlotte Beedrills and the Oshawots should move up to at least the top 4.
Okay, so who do we think should go into the number 2 slot then instead? Is I guess the next question.
I think based on just the way Bryan should have to go into that second spot.
So that'll that'll bump down Krimic to 6, and Lux raised to 5. So then the next question is, do you think I belong in number 4, or do you think Oshawots should go there?
I personally think you belong at 5.
Okay, that's my lucky number. So
for the moment,
because
I still think you could have won that game out. You've still got a strong team, but I think 5 is the best place for you at the moment.
I would have to agree,
because we never actually saw you complete the match, so you might have lost, you might have won. So I think Oshawots should move up to 4th. I personally think the Southeast Luxrays should move behind the Krumich Colossals, and the Alchemies should move up into 6th. And I think the Krumich Colossals should stay in 7th.
Yeah, I can agree to that. I can definitely agree to that.
Yeah, I believe the Alchemies should move up into 6th for now, because they did a relatively convincing win. They beat out the Southeast Luxrays as well, so it makes them come above them. I think the Krumich Colossals should drop down to at least 7th, because they still won a set and a very convincing 4-0 sweep.
Yeah. Interesting strategy.
So I believe the Somerville Scraggies should move up to 9th because they did win. So I think 9th is the least position that we could put them in. I don't think we can really drop the Southeast Luxrays too much further than that, because they did a good game. It was a good game they played. I feel like dropping them any further would be a disservice.
Definitely. And especially since we rated them so high initially, I think it's important to sort of like keep that in mind, that like just one match doesn't drop you to the end of the rankings. You still probably have a good team if everybody sort of evaluated you properly.
I think the Marowak should be 10th at least.
Yeah, that's a really big jump too. I think
you could argue that actually the Marowaks are a place above the Somerville Scraggies.
I would maybe argue that too. I would put I know that we didn't the data isn't official, but I think the Aegis / Blades are actually undervalued here.
I'm planning on moving them up.
Yeah.
I seriously think we should drop wherever the London Lucaris were, which were 9th, at least into 13th.
Yeah, I think 13th makes sense. I think, once again, 1 or 2 good trades, then that team becomes very scary. But you need to also be able to back up that threat with like good prep and stuff. And it didn't seem like they prepped super well this match, unfortunately.
I think this is a good positioning now, final positioning. What I've done here is moved, because I was doing it whilst you were talking, I've moved the Marowaks from 13th to 9th. I've moved the Somerville Scraggies from 11th to 10th. The South Croydon Saws have moved up from 14th all the way to 11th. Yeah. I've kept the Kamalas at 12th because they lost, but it wasn't really a massive loss. Yeah. I've moved the Aggie Slashes up to 14th from 15th because it was going to be a close-ish game against you.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I've moved the Dark Lord Greninjas. I feel like the Dark Lord Greninjas shouldn't be moved down that far, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think
because they were in 10th.
I think it's reasonable to put I think it's reasonable to put them in 12th. Move the Kamalas down one, them to 12th.
Yeah.
And then maybe swap. Maybe
The
Lucario's
Lucarios.
just dropped down to 15th. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable. It's a really big drop,
From
but
from 9th to 15th.
it was
I
such
mean,
a
that's
blowout, right? Like, you know,
yeah.
I think that was a really hard loss, and that kind of needed to be a moment where it could show that its team could put up a fight.
Yeah.
I think just not being able to prep for like Dusclops being swapped out by Roar or something similar to that is like pretty relevant. I don't think this ranking will stick. Personally, I think they'll get better. But I think for now, they did show to be pretty weak for this first week at least.
Yeah. I think we've got to keep the Like of Rocks at the bottom for this week.
Yeah.
That's just because of they didn't manage to win out a set or anything. If they'd managed to pick up a set, I would argue putting them above the London Lucarios at the very least.
Yeah.
So we'll see what this next week will bring.
It's kind of difficult because you do want to, because arguably the Lily Cove Lycan Rocks played better, and you could even argue prepped better than the London Lucarios did, but just for the sole reason that he didn't take he didn't take a game. I tend to agree, keep him at 16.
It's also hard that we had the London Lucarios ranked at number 9, and they've already taken quite a significant drop already.
Yeah, that might have been. I think that was on me because I overlooked in my ranking a little bit.
I rated the London Lucarios quite high, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I stand by that. I think that like, I still think their team is very good. They just need a couple things to be traded, honestly, and that'll really help them out.
So do you want to show the last week's rankings versus this week's rankings just quickly?
Yeah. So just a quick little side by side. Here's last week's rankings.
There we go.
Just,
So
you can see a little
as
bit.
you can see, we've had the Landorus move down, me move up. So a few other teams jiggled around here and there. A couple of places moved for a few teams.
I think the Aegis/Blades also have a very strong chance of getting higher up on this list. I just think that the lack of like certainty to how the match went kind of made it a little stagnant.
It'll be interesting to see how this next week's match will go for them.
Let's talk about for just a second. Let's talk about like trades that were made, because those will be relevant.
Yes. So the first trade was for the South Croydon Swords. So they dropped Comfey, and they've picked up Darmanitan, which was the exact pickup that we suggested in our post-draft analysis video.
Yeah, definitely.
I believe what we said, basically, he was already considering it, and it basically just pushed him to just do it. I definitely think it's a good pickup as well. Like Darmanitan under Tailwind with that sheer force, and it just hits hard.
He's a one-man army, honestly. Like,
and what was interesting is that he put Comfey back on the table,
which was then grabbed.
Which is what we'll go into now, which was grabbed within minutes by the Somerville Scraggies. So the Somerville Scraggies have dropped Reuniclus, have picked up the Comfey, and again, that's another suggestion that we made in that draft analysis.
Yeah, I'll take credit for that one. It's like, this team is like desperate for a Comfey.
Comfey just helps the Regirock, it helps the Goodra. It's just it really makes that team that little bit more threatening.
Yeah,
I say little, I mean very threatening.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Comfey is just such a great enabling Pokemon.
It is, and it also just lets Mons live forever.
Yeah, gotta be you have to have a plan against it for sure.
And that triage is just so annoying as it makes it +3, and Comfey isn't a slow Pokemon, so a lot of fake out users can't fake it out.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. So any other trades I know I did.
We've got the Southeast Luxrays trading Sea King for Lycanroc Midnight, which provides him a rock type stab, which I think is something that the team was missing.
Right.
I personally like the trade. I think Lycanroc it's got that no guard ability. It's hits hard with Stone Edge. It hits hard with Outrage, Close Combat. It's got a surprisingly wide move pool with like Play Rough, and it can do decent damage. It's just that little bit of that weird speed tier.
I've got to admit, I don't know too much about the Midnight form of Lycanroc, and
I can run Brick Break for destroying screens. It's a good tier 4, I'd say.
I think it's one of the better tier 4s. It was moved down to tier 4 this season, which I think was nice because it provides an extra mon in tier 4, and I was quite surprised that it wasn't picked up in the initial draft. So it's quite nice to see that it's been picked up.
Yeah.
It doesn't get the Excel Rock, but it can do other things.
So the other team other than yourself is the Merseyside Marowaks. Now, they made 2 of their trades this week, which was for Thunderous Incarnate traded for their mascot, Marowak Alola, and Magmar traded for Claydol.
I think these were good
just
trades.
Adds another Trick Room setter. I think the Magmar Claydol trade is interesting.
I kind of,
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Claydol.
I do think that they are prepping to maybe drop at some point the Carbink, which it makes sense why they would pick up the second Trick Room setter in the terms of Claydol. I think Claydol is another one of those tier 4s that you got to respect. It's a very good pickup in terms of tier 4.
Yeah.
And it's like incredibly bulky, gets a lot of cool things you can do, especially since they have redirection in the form of Amoonguss.
Amoonguss.
Claydol has the ability to set Trick Room fairly consistently, especially more than I'd say someone like a
Carbink,
who really only does one thing.
As a steal is hurtful.
Yeah.
It's also a very slow screen setter, but it does decent damage with body press, so I suppose that's something.
And the Alola Marowak pick also makes a lot of sense, replacing the Magmar with a different fire type. Ghost is a very powerful offensive typing, and defensive, so Marowak can be very scary.
And it's also got that Lightning Rod ability, which helps 2 water-type Spiroscuda and Blastoise.
Hidden ability is Rockhead, so it could before that it could go Rockhead and not take any recoil from
its Flare Blitz.
That's pretty interesting. I didn't realize
as I say, the Lightning Rod is pretty good for its Blastoise and Barraskewda. Yeah. You've got that thick club on that already decent attack. 80 is it attack stat? Yeah. It's got 2 strong physical attacking moves in Flare Blitz and Poltergeist. And Marowak Alola even gets Ally Switch for if you want an Ally Switch next to it with Trick Rooms to guarantee Trick Room. So it was incredibly strong back in like Series 6 with like Porygon 2.
Yeah.
So he's got that budget Porygon.
A lot of people used it when it was first released for Series 5 as well. I remember seeing a lot of Trick Room leads with Marowak on the ladder.
So I think it's a good pick. It does leave Thunderous Incarnate back on the table, which I think is a great prank summon, which I'm sure someone should pick up.
Yeah. I was almost considering swapping my Zapdos for it, but I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Nah.
No need for that.
Zapdos. So lastly, the last trades, which were yours, was a Mulga for Fletchling and a tier 3 trade of Riolu for Kangaskhan. Now, at the end of our power ranking video, we suggested for you to swap out a Mulga, didn't we?
Yeah, definitely.
We said that was our weakest player of your team. I think that Fletchling pickup is a nice addition.
Definitely. You got a lot of little cute utility that I can actually do. It's pretty slow, unfortunately. It does have the Gale Wings for its flying type moves.
Yeah.
But it's pretty slow when it comes to things like it has Will-O-Wisp.
I picked it up as my final pick last season, and I didn't bring it very often, but the 2 weeks that I did, I won. So
Yeah, I think being able to set up Tailwind on my team was something that I undervalued at first when drafting, but realizing once I actually started prepping for my first week, I was like, Tailwind would be really nice. So
Yeah.
I picked it up.
And that makes sense because Emolga wasn't really offering you didn't already have in the form of Prankster or Zapdos, or it did have that speed swap, but like you already had mons that were faster anyway.
Definitely.
Then you next trade, which was Riolo for Kangaskhan, which honestly, Kangaskhan is a really good mon. I was surprised it lasted so long.
I think
Scrappy Fake Out is always a good. I think it's the only mon that has access to a Scrappy Fake Out.
And that's actually pretty relevant, right? Because there's a lot of ghost types that can set Trick Room, and I'm a team that really doesn't want to have Trick Room up. And so being able to fake out ghost types was something that I thought about. And like having fake out in general, because the only other fake out I had at the time was Impidimp, which is not necessarily a mon that I always want to bring, just to enable one or two things all the time. I think Kangaskhan really helped me out.
So, and I believe that was all the trades made this week ready for week 2.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the matchups. So, okay, so first up, we've got the London Lucarios versus the Dark Lords Greninjas. Now, we'll just have a quick look into their teams. But they've got obviously, we've got the Trick Room heavy team, which Bryan beat, and we've got the Rain Mode protecting the Kartana and Incineroar Grimmsnarl team. Now, basically, both teams lost their opening matches, so they're both looking for this first win. I'm personally straight up just leaning more towards that the Dark Lords will win, because they've got the Incineroar, they've got the Grimmsnarl.
So here's my question for this matchup, and it's always going to be like London Lucarios, can they get up Trick Room, right? That's always going to be the question. They do have the Purloin, which can copycat a Max Cofagrigus or even a.
But let's be honest.
Well, I mean, it's not so bad.
I don't think we should discount it in at least 1 week, but
Right. And I think they're going to probably be evaluating that a little bit closer, right? But then the question is whether or not there's anything on the Dark Lord Ninja's side that can stop these things from happening, right?
I think there is.
Yeah, I mean, I do too.
Orbital G-Max, I think, could be very strong for him. Orbital is the only mon on his team that gets Trick Room and Imprison, I believe.
Yeah, I do think so as well.
And that is probably the best way for him to stop a Trick Room team is by imprisoning Trick Room. But you look at the opponent's team, and he's got, it's Dusclops, but he's got a Dusclops, he's got Turtonator, he's got Purloin, he's got Torkoal, he's got Cofagrigus, he's got Scrafty, he's got Palossand. He's got 7 mons that are super effective against that Orbital.
Yeah. So it's going to be tough.
So that Orbital has a lot of pressure on it to prevent that Trick Room. But all he needs to do is live 1 hit from any of them mons.
I also think that it's possible. I know Grimmsnarl gets Taunt. I'm not sure if Incineroar does, but I think it might.
Yeah, both do.
And both of those are dark types. So, I mean, you have trouble with the ghost types. Maybe look to those.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure. Obviously one of those guys can run Mental Herb to deal with Taunt, but could be sketchy. There could be something different status effect coming first, and then they taunt you, or something similar. To try to get rid of that.
I think ultimately the Dark Lords Greninjas have the tools to prevent the Trick Room. It's also a conflict of Rain Mode versus Sun Mode with Torkoal.
Yeah.
The Rain Mode also protects the Orbital from the Fire types. So honestly, I'm just leaning on. I think the Dark Lords will win out. I don't know what the score will be, but I think they'll win.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think they have an advantage. Since the London Lucarios didn't make any trades, which I think was something that we really recommended for this team.
Yeah, get something that can support the trick room a little better than Scrafty Fake Out.
Yeah.
Maybe a redirection user, if there's one still available.
Yeah,
There's some Rage Powder users.
Maybe still available.
Oh, Togepi, yeah, tier 3.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
So
better than Shitonic.
Okay.
So
yeah, definitely. So that's what we predict that for that matchup anyway. So moving on from that, it's you, isn't it, Drowsy Dracozols? I actually think this is a difficult matchup to predict who will come out on top. They're both very fast teams that want to be moving first. You both have the tech to be able to move first. With Tailwind support. You've got some incredibly fast mons. You've got Sceptile on one side with Unburden. You've got Fire mode, Sun mode with Venusaur on the other side. There's a lot of similarities between these two teams.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think there's something that the South Korean Swords that have the advantage on is the beat up mode with the Sneasel Terrakion. But I still think that the Dracozolts have the capabilities to force them to not just spam beat up and go for the KOs, because a Venusaur you got Sleep Powder from Venusaur that could work if it's in Sun. You've got Inteleon, which can do some decent damage. It's just, without getting too specific with what's there, Stack Attacker, Flygon, they're all mons that can do some damage to that Terrakion lead.
Yeah.
So I think this is a lot closer, and I do expect this game to be a 2-1 result. I don't know who will come out on top. If I to back anyone, then I would back the Dracozolts in this situation. So that's not so much as who I expect to win, but who I kind of want to win, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
I am biased.
Yeah, that's all right.
I mean, you are in this video.
Yeah. Well, we've been working together a long time, so.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think, Brian? Do you think I have a chance?
I just was noticing that you had a lot to say in the Discord, so I definitely understand how much prep you're going into this, and so I hope that the prep that will do you some good.
I definitely think the South Korean Swords, though, do have a solid chance.
Yeah,
they've definitely got the tools. They are clearly a decent player and are very good at their prep.
Yeah, another thing to mention is that, funnily enough, despite the fact that I have so many fast mons with like 100 speed, he has a bunch of mons with above 100 speed. So the only one that I can even match toe-to-toe with is with Inteleon. Against
Inteleon and Sceptile have the same speed.
Sceptile, but Inteleon outspeeds everything else on his team. But most of their team outspeeds my team, despite the fact that I have such Sonic level speeds.
Gotta go fast.
Gotta go fast.
Or gotta go slow. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
So, moving on, who we got next?
Next in line is the Krimic Colossals versus the Lilycove Lycanrocs.
So, both teams lost their opening games, but I'm just gonna put out there, I genuinely think Colossals will take this, and that's because of the Lilycove Lycanrocs have a lot to deal with physical mons, with a Salamence, Landorus, so they're very well prepped for physical teams. But the Corviknight is one of their most bulky mons, and Magnezone, and that's weak to Colossal. And he's got Crawdaunt, which is a good mon to deal with at Colossal, but that Crawdaunt doesn't want to be taking hits from Porygon Z.
Right.
Right.
So
Plus,
I think
Shellos exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the Lily Cove Lycan Rocks are going to find it hard pressed to counter the Krymka Colossals, especially with their redirection support of NDD.
Yeah.
So without going too in depth, because I don't want to like give too much away, I think this is going to be a win for the Colossals.
I would
agree.
tend to agree, and I think this is also another really important thing. I'm going to keep hammering this in. Trades are good. If
Yeah.
you have, not everyone's going to have the perfect team like Matrix does straight out the gate.
I don't have a
I know, I'm just
team.
kidding. You could stand to use a trade or two, but I think overall your team is very consistently
That's just because
strong.
you don't like Moltres.
I do
Accept
think you
your
should
praise,
trade.
Matrix.
But
Accept
either
that
way,
praise. Accept your praise.
I've already made 4 trades in these last 2 weeks. So I just
Four
think
of your 5.
yeah, 4 of my 5, and my 5th
Yeah.
is spoiler alert, it's coming. I have
Yeah.
it all planned out, but trades are really, really, really important in a draft league because when you're seeing this, you're seeing like that Lily Cove doesn't really have a whole lot in terms of like they have a Weavile which they can take advantage of because you can fake it out, but they don't have the fake out, right? You can try to you see they don't have like they have Landorus T, which maybe can deal with the Colossal with like a strong ground move. But then again, you're against a Weavile, right? So yeah, like the Landorus, you can't really do anything against that. So you need some sort of like you kind of just need more options here, and like it kind of feels like
Yeah.
whatever they bring is gonna be difficult to really like deal with these modes, right? These combos that the Krymka Colossals is notorious for at this point in terms of like everybody feeling like they're one of the strongest teams, right? They were scary to look at because on paper they have all these combos.
I do think, looking at this, Umbreon is going to be a low-key star player for Lily Cove Lycan Rocks in this matchup. So yeah, I again to end that one, I think the Colossals are going to win. I believe we're all in agreement on that one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So then the next matchup, which is
Orlando
our
Oshawotts
very
versus
own,
Charlotte Beedrills.
yes, and unfortunately we haven't got Oddball with us today, but
Otherwise, the
it's
trash
fine.
talk could happen, right?
Oh, exactly. I It's hard because of obviously I don't want to give too much away because of I know some of Charlotte Beedrill's prep,
Yeah.
but without going too much, I think
Well,
some
yeah.
obvious modes the Oshawotts could run is Whimsicott is a big staple. I think Hitmonchan and Crocodile could be pretty threatening to the Beedrills. Um,
Agreed.
he's got dual intimidate with Arcanine and Crocodile for the Beedrill's physical mons, which can be quite difficult to deal with. Um,
And both of them match up
the
well to the inner focus mon being Entei, right?
yeah,
It's not like Entei can really take them on, at least up front. I can't see any way he does without some enabling.
or going special Soul Beam. But
That
yeah, I know,
that doesn't even deal with Arcanine though, right?
No, exactly. So I think it is a difficult matchup. I do think the Oshawotts have a slight advantage here. That Rotom Wash is great. I know there's the Cradily on the other side. If I'm to say what I expect the outcome to be, I predict it'd be a 2-1 win. If the Oshawotts prove to be as good at controlling the pace of their own game as what they did in week 1, I think that they could just edge it out here. I think that's what will decide the outcome of this game is how each coach controls the pace of the game.
Yeah. I think just to throw the weight over to the other side, I do think Charlotte Beedrills have a pretty strong chance of winning this as well. I think their sand mode can't be trifled with, and
100%.
And I think that like just having even with double intimidate, you still have some interesting options. All you need to do is to either kill one of those mons somehow or have some good switches so that you avoid the intimidate, and you know, Excadrill can really pop off. You know, Gigalith even has some good chances. Credilli even like looks pretty good in this matchup. Like, I really like it against the double water. I really like it against getting that boost to its special defense in Sandstorm against some of the more special mons on this team. Like,
Cradilly is such a weird typing.
Yeah, so
I always forget its weaknesses. It's steel, rock, and ice. Steel, fighting, and ice.
Yeah, and there's no ice there. The only steel type is the Doublade. The only fighting is Hitmonchan, which is a tier 4. It hits hard, but you know, generally easier to deal with than something more threatening, right? So not the best stabs against this Credilli here. Who knows?
I think I will back the Beedrills, even though I think Oshawotts have a strong chance.
Yeah,
I think they both have
I'm
a strong
nervous.
chance.
I'm pretty nervous for this matchup, so I'll take a 1-2 loss if I have to. I'll take it.
I think the Orlando Oshawotts will probably take this just based on what I'm looking at. But I do think that there's some room for creativity on the Charlotte Beedrill side and some good playmaking, you know, that can really, really turn it around. The tools are there. Just like on paper, it looks like the Orlando Oshawotts are probably a little bit stronger in this specific matchup.
Yeah. Okay, so we move now to the Bavarian Landorus versus the Southeast Luxrays. And this, in my opinion, is another unfavorable matchup for the Southeast Luxrays. Yeah, I think Bavarian Landorus have the initial advantage because of, again, it pressures his Rillaboom Max so much. It pressures his Center Scorch with that dual wing beat Scizor. I think the Southeast Luxrays have the means to counter the Landorus, but that Sableye being the slower prankster means that Meowstic is going to struggle for the weather control. Drifblim could be pretty good for the weather control in this matchup, though.
I'm actually pretty partial to the Luxrays here. I think the Lycanroc Midnight's like a pretty solid pickup for this matchup, right? Because it can contest the Charizard a little bit. It has, it doesn't have the best speed, but you could speed swap with Kadabra. You can set Tailwind with the Drifblim after setting some terrain and getting that seed off, and then switching into like. So there's like some pretty good options here for him. Get Tailwind with and Pheasant as well. You just have to be aware of that hyper aggression that's possible from the Bavarian Landorus. Like Urshifu, Charizard, even like, you know, Latias has some potential. Scizor has some potential. So like, just like upfront aggression is kind of difficult to deal with. But if you can find a way, and I think Tapu Fini can really help with that. I think Meowstic setting screens can really help with that. So there's a lot of actual pretty great options here for the Luxrays.
It'll be interesting to see if he does bring the Rillaboom G-Max in front of that, because of it matches up so well against that Gastrodon.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I do think that you do need at least a grass type move when going into when you're going into a match against a Gastrodon. You really need it. Or freeze dry, yeah.
But to be fair, physical grass type move is better damage.
Yeah, especially priority, like something like Rillaboom gets.
Yeah. So I think that's something the Bavarian Landorus will have to take into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so I'm actually gonna say I think the Luxrays. I'm gonna vote for the Luxrays on this one.
Honestly, I agree. I'm actually, although I think the Bavarian are strong, I think the Luxrays can out prep.
I just think Tapu Fini has such a strong matchup against both of the typings that are scary on their team. This Charizard and the Urshifu, right? Fairy to deal with the Fighting Dark, and Water to deal with the Charizard. And obviously Gastrodon exists, but
I'm pretty sure Tapu Fini gets access to stuff like Grass Knot, which can always max overgrowth.
I-
And then I think a mon that really complements this mode is either Center Scorch or Nidoqueen from the Southeast Luxrays.
Mhm.
Because Nidoqueen covers that Manectric that Tapu Fini struggles against.
Mhm.
And it also gets both of the mons get the fire type moves for the Sizzle, which could be a potential issue for Tapu Fini as well.
And here's another thing. I think even if you run something like Rillaboom, a switch into a Centiskorch who can just absorb a fire move is threatening enough, right? Of course, the flying type does kill Centiskorch a lot of times, so maybe the Charizard's just going to use flying moves, but for some reason you think that it's going to blast off a fire move, which is its strongest G-Max move, right? It sets the fire on your side of the field, so they're probably looking to do that in most cases at some point in the game, right?
Honestly, the Charizard G-Max, it's got the highest speed of pretty much every mon on the Luxray's team outside of Tailwind. So, but that's the other thing. So like, do they want to be setting that max airstream off to get that speed boost? Do they need that speed boost in a lot of situations?
Yeah.
I would say one of the biggest things for the Southeast Luxrays is to just be able to find a way to get up the Tailwind if they can.
Yeah.
That'll give them a significant advantage against this team. But keep in mind, Latias also gets Tailwind. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind.
I do think the Drifblim matches up well, though, for that, because of obviously Drifblim threatens the Latias. I know Latias has a base 130 special defense, but you've got Drifblim, which is a faster terrain setter. It can't be faked out by the Thwackey or Sableye. So you've got this semi-reliable Tailwind setter from that side.
Okay, well, we voted.
So,
Bryan, do you have a vote in this matchup? Who you think is going to win?
I think the Luxrays have a chance. He preps really well, and I think he's a little frustrated that even though he's prepping really well, the results aren't there. So
Right.
I'd like to see him get this win, but then also the Bavarian Landers are the Bavarian Landers at this point.
Yeah.
They're a really solid team. He's got his work cut out for him.
That's
okay,
just
so moving on, we've got my team, the Welsh Waylords, versus the Merseyside Marowaks. So I'm not going to speak too much about this, but obviously I'm going to back myself because I'd be a fool not to back myself.
I have helped you prep a little bit against this team, so
Yes.
I will be more conservative, but I will point out some stuff, right? That is probably fairly obvious to both sides. I think a couple things to keep in mind. You have a few modes that the Marowaks can that have to prep for, right? You have your Metagross plus Spectrier combo. You have the Hail mode. You have the infamous Aromatisse Drampa Trick Room mode, now including a little bit of a Fungus in there.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of little things you got to prep for. Obviously, Merseyside Marowaks really do like Trick Room, and I think they're leaning into that a little bit more. But they also have Rabombi on the team with Speed Swap, so you can suddenly give your Glastrier 124 speed out the gate, which is really, really terrifying. Plus, they have a Noivern who can set the Tailwind, so they don't really need to always rely on the Trick Room. Something I think the London Lucarios can make note of when potentially considering trades. Yeah, I think that just you got some really interesting potential teams to come out here. There's a lot that can be done, and I think both teams are going to have difficulty prepping, just because you want to be able to play your strong modes, but you also want to be able to react to their modes appropriately, and you have to evaluate whether your mode is better than their mode and for what reason. And it's easy to miss stuff when you get to that point, when it starts to be sort of a several layers down of 3D chess as to what the other side's going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take.
So yeah, obviously I'm backing myself in this one. I don't mind if you two back the opposition, to be honest.
I'm unsure. I'm unsure. I think the Marowak is a pretty solid pickup that he brought this week against your Metagross and your Spectrier, especially since he can protect it with Amoonguss. And so that's a huge threat alongside Glastrier, who can do a whole lot as well. So, all in all, I think that he has the advantage. So I'm gonna say that I do think, just based on like having an advantage, that he will win. Just like, that seems to be the reasonable, logical conclusion there. But I don't think it's like a distinct advantage. I don't think it's like miles apart. I think it's very, very, very slight. And I've been helping you prep as well, so if I have any faith in my own help to you, then maybe hopefully you win. So yeah, maybe, you know what, I changed my mind. Since since I need to have some faith in myself, I'll say you'll win.
It's fine. I'm gonna max Fungus, and you'll see.
I mean, that's a good idea, obviously. Right into his Marowak Alola to establish dominance.
Hey, foul play Fungus into a Marowak. Don't
sleep
that'll
on
pick
it.
up a KO.
Go ahead.
There's definitely an even matchup on in that, because both really good. Both players really comfortable with Trick Room, it seems. So it's definitely an even matchup. Could go either way.
Yeah. So just to add, lastly, I think the 3D chess analogy is really good because I have a mode that beats his mode, but then he has another mode that beats that mode, and it's a lot of back and forth, on paper, and it'll be interesting to see what we both end up bringing in the end. Okay.
Cool.
So moving on, we'll only briefly touch upon this because this match was actually played on the same day as this was recorded, so we won't actually do any predictions. There's no real need to talk too much in depth about this, but about this team, as the match has already taken place. But I do think this was a more favorable matchup for the Alchemies, because you've got that Lapras G-Max, you've got that Moltres Galar, and that threatens Venusaur G-Max. It threatens the Dragapult massively. The Chandelure can do so much damage to a Venusaur.
Yeah.
If you wanted to run Sun, you're already looking at these mons that are really putting pressure on the most dominant modes that the Kamalas have. And that's not getting into the fact that there's Alchemy to boost it further. There's Appleton, which can completely destroy Kabutops because it's so bulky.
Yeah.
And you've also got that Altaria, which has Cloud9, which just negates the weather mode. So I won't spoil the result of this match. I think the Kamalas had a hard prep to do to try and get any type of advantage on the Alchemies. And we'll go more in depth on this matchup next week. Okay, so the last match is the Somerville Scraggies versus the Aggie/Blades.
I think obviously the modes are beat up Cobalion, the Comfey with synergy with the Gudra and the Regirock.
The thing with this matchup is I don't see straight away what does the Aggie/Slash do to stop any setup from Comfey. Because the fake out's too slow, the redirection moves after the Comfey.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think that
Kingdra's a special attacker primarily, so Gudra doesn't even worry about that.
I think Aegislash actually is like a pretty good mon here.
Yeah.
I think like,
especially with no fire type on Somerville's side.
Yeah, and
no major ghost type.
Yep, and
no ground
major
type.
Ground type either.
Yeah, I think Aegislash is actually the play here.
Because I think even though you generally don't want to max Aegislash, because of how his mechanics work. You could do something kind of interesting that I like to sometimes do when that's the case, is to like have a support max almost, to just like get speed control, and like buff up the Aegis Slash, while he's kind of switches between his modes. And I don't know in particular which mon that would fall to, but that seems pretty reasonable to me.
I do think, though, the Scraggies can nerf the Aegis Slash, because obviously Aegis Slash is quite slow. You've got Bolton with Charm, you've got Inteleon, which he's shown to already use Breaking Swipe on, lower the attack. You've got Gudra, which gets Breaking Swipe.
You know, it's really interesting, though.
Dracloak Breaking Swipe.
Aegis Slash has a really good special attack stat, too.
Yeah, it does. 150 special attack, but then it's going to be completely walled by Gudra.
Potentially. Yeah, I mean...
140 special attack. It lost 10 in its attack and defenses in the switch
this
from
gen.
10-7.
Yeah.
But, you know, Gudra can be scared of Mimikyu, for instance. Like, the dual ghost combo is, like, pretty interesting.
That is very true. And what's even more interesting is the ghost type stab. The ghost type stab for physical mons plus the max poltergeist, or whatever it's called, phantasm, lowers the defense of the opponent for like Gudra. That's an issue.
Yeah, maybe Mimikyu is the sort of like support mon that I was thinking about. You know, find ways to deal with what they're bringing.
So,
all right. Well, what is your prediction?
I think the Scraggies, although they don't have that initial damage, super effective damage for the Aggie Slash, I still think they will come out on top in this matchup. I think their prep is really good. They've got that redirection from Togekiss to help set up the Mon that needs to be in the Comfey to set up the damage for some of the other mons. I just
having just pseudo played the Aegis Slash Blades, I definitely think that their prep is also very strong. Regardless of that, I do think that Somerville Scraggies have a level of power on their team that is hard to match, and hard to disrupt. I do think that Somerville Scraggy just has like a pretty just powerful, bulky, hard to break team that you need to kind of account for so much against, that in my opinion they're not going to be able to crack that. I'm very curious to see if they prove me wrong, though. I think
100%.
I think that like if they can beat this team, I think that will indicate to me that Aegis Slash Blades are like a pretty strong contender for a top 8 spot.
So
is that it?
That's the last matchup.
Hey.
I think that's a good place to end the video then.
Fantastic.
Thanks everyone for tuning in and watching this long analysis for week 1. Hopefully, if it gets enough people liking it, we will be back again for week 2. So,
and hopefully we can get Oddball onto here next time too.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice. So,
alrighty.
Okay, I think that's it.
Oddball and I will talk trash. We'll talk trash to each other about our matchup in week 2. It'll be fun.
Yeah, it'd be good to get both of you on here to talk about your matchup from both perspectives, to be honest. So,
yeah,
we'll be looking forward to that. In the meantime, I will link all the videos to the individual week 1 matches in the description. And funny enough, I believe I'll be joining the Merseyside, the Ancient Jedi, on their Matchamp of the Day podcast for week 2 after our matchup. So I'll probably see you all there next.
Alrighty.
Fantastic.
So well then.
Thanks for tuning in.
Subscribe to Matrix. Subscribe to me.
Don't subscribe to me.
That's always nice.
If you subscribe to me, I will find you. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace out, guys.
See ya.